The arena floated above a dying star, its light casting long shadows across the metallic walls. Thousands of alien voices filled the air, chanting, roaring, waiting for the next battle. At the center of this massive coliseum stood a human, young, unarmed, and alone. The people in the crowd did not cheer for him. They laughed, they pointed, they shouted insults in languages he could not understand. To them he was small, fragile, weak. In their eyes, a human could never stand against the champions of their kind. And yet, he was here, chosen for something he did not fully understand. At the high platform above the arena, 4 sisters watched. They were tall, armored, their eyes glowing with strange fire, each one a warrior who had crushed armies. Together they were feared across the stars. But tonight their attention was fixed on him. The eldest sister leaned forward, her voice echoing through the arena. "My sisters think you are too weak for us. Prove them wrong tonight." Her words carried weight like heavy chains, pressing on him. Every creature in the stands went silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into laughter and jeers. The human clenched his fists. His breath sharp in his chest, he looked up at the sisters. At their cold eyes staring down, he did not reply, not with words. His silence was his answer. He would show them with action, not with empty talk. The eldest sister raised her hand, and the great gates of the arena opened with a deep groan. The ground shook as the first trial prepared to begin. From behind the gates came the sound of metal grinding against metal. Sharp, piercing, terrible. The crowd leaned forward, their eyes shining with hunger. They had come for blood. They had come to see a fragile human crushed in seconds. But the human stood firm, his heart pounding, his mind screaming with fear. But deep inside, there was something stronger than fear. Memories flashed in his mind. His home world, his people, their faith in him, the promise he made before stepping into this place. He would not let them down. He would not let humanity be remembered as weak. Not tonight, not ever. The gates fully opened, and the air filled with steam. The sound of footsteps, heavy, brutal. Machines entered the arena, their bodies covered in blades, spinning, whirring, snapping. These were no simple enemies. They were designed to tear flesh apart. The sisters smiled from above, their eyes cold and sharp. One whispered to another, "He will not last a minute," another chuckled. "Look how small he is. His bones will break like twigs." But the youngest sister did not laugh. Her gaze was different, curious, almost cautious. The human bent his knees, ready. His eyes locked on the machines. The crowd shouted louder. "Die, human, die!" they screamed. "Weak, weak!" Weak, their voices echoed in his ears. But instead of breaking him, it lit a fire inside his chest. The eldest sister raised her arm, then brought it down. The signal was given. The machines charged, their blades spinning with deadly speed. The ground trembled beneath their weight. The arena roared with excitement. This was the moment they waited for. The human moved faster than they expected, rolling aside as the first machine struck, its blades cutting deep into the stone floor. Sparks flew. He felt the heat. He felt the danger, but he was alive. His instincts sharp, his body moving before his fear could stop him. The crowd gasped, not in admiration but in surprise. They did not expect him to dodge even once. Above, the sisters leaned forward, their smiles fading slightly. The eldest narrowed her eyes, her voice low. "Interesting." The machines turned, their eyes glowing red. They came again, faster, angrier, blades spinning like storms. The human's breath grew heavy, but his focus sharpened. He could not overpower them with strength. He needed speed, he needed wit. Every move had to count. He ran, dodged, slid under a blade. Sparks cut across his arm. Pain burned his skin, but he kept moving, his eyes scanning the arena, looking for patterns, looking for weakness. The crowd shouted louder. Some laughed, some screamed. Some began to cheer without realizing. The human was making them feel something they had not felt in years. Suspense, doubt. The sisters watched in silence now, no laughter. Only cold eyes following his every move. The youngest whispered, "He's not like the others." But the eldest silenced her with a glare. The machines cornered him, 3 on all sides. Blades spinning, death closing in. The crowd shouted for the final strike. Waiting to see blood, the sisters leaned forward, their smiles returning, but at that very moment, the human dropped flat to the ground. The machines lunged forward, colliding with each other, their blades cutting into metal, sparks and fire bursting into the air. The arena shook, the crowd gasped. The machines screeched in anger, damaged but not destroyed, and the human pulled himself up, his chest heaving, sweat on his face, his eyes burning with determination. He was not finished, not yet. From above, The eldest sister's smile faded, her voice low but sharp. Perhaps he is not as weak as I thought. The crowd fell silent for a moment, watching, waiting. The human stood tall in the middle of chaos, a single fragile figure surrounded by monsters of steel. But his spirit, unbroken, made him look larger than all of them. The trial had only just begun. The dust had not yet settled. The sound of broken steel still echoed across the arena. The human stood tall, breathing hard, sweat dripping, his eyes locked on the massive gates ahead. The first challenge had not killed him, and that fact alone silenced the crowd for a moment. The sisters above watched closely, their glowing eyes sharp. The eldest tapped her armored fingers against the railing, her voice like thunder. You survived the opening act, but the real trial begins now. Her words rolled through the arena like fire, and the crowd erupted again, their voices shaking the very walls. The gate screeched open once more, the sound long, metallic, cruel. From within came a new wave of light, reflections of blades spinning endless. A new set of machines entered, larger than before, their bodies tall like towers, their arms nothing but sharpened saws, their legs nothing but slicing wheels. They were not built to chase. They were built to cut everything in their path. The human swallowed hard, his chest tightening, his body still sore from the first fight. But he knew this was no time to think of pain. He had one thought only: survive, prove them wrong, show them that humans were more than fragile flesh. The crowd leaned forward, pointing, laughing, their voices rising. Too weak. Too weak, no chance, they shouted, their words crashing like waves against him. But he did not bow his head. He stared into the storm of blades, his eyes unblinking. The eldest sister raised her hand once again. The signal was given. The machines whirred to life, spinning, roaring, their sound louder than thunder. The ground trembled beneath their heavy wheels. Sparks flew as their blades cut into stone. The human darted left. The first machine lunged, a spinning arm slicing inches from his chest. The air burned with heat. He rolled under another blade, sparks cutting across his back, pain sharp. But he did not stop. The crowd screamed with joy. They wanted his blood. They wanted to see him broken. But the youngest sister leaned forward, her voice soft, only for her siblings to hear. Look at him, he learns as he fights. His movements are sharper than before, the middle sister hissed. It does not matter. These machines will grind him into dust. The human ran across the arena, searching, his eyes darting, his mind racing. Strength alone would not save him. He needed a plan, a weakness, and then he saw it. The blades were fast, yes, but their turning slowed when they struck stone. Their momentum dipped for a heartbeat. That heartbeat was his window. He waited, his breathing slow. The machine lunged again. Its saw arm tearing into the ground. Stone cracked, sparks rose, and in that exact moment, the human leapt onto its arm, climbing fast. The crowd gasped. No one had ever dared such madness. The machine roared, twisting, spinning, trying to throw him off, its blades inches from his legs, but he climbed higher, his body moving with desperate speed until he reached the shoulder. He slammed his elbow into the glowing eye of the beast. Glass cracked, sparks exploded. The machine screeched in pain. Its wheels spinning wildly, the crowd rose to their feet, shouting, screaming, some still mocking, but others now cheering without knowing why. The human dropped from the machine as it spun out of control, crashing into another, their blades tearing into each other, fire bursting into the air. The sisters watched, their faces no longer calm. The eldest's jaw tightened. The second sister spat. Luck? Nothing more. But the youngest's eyes burned brighter. No, not luck, he adapts. He survives because he refuses to die. The human landed hard, his knee aching, his arm bleeding, but he forced himself up, his chest heaving. He turned to face the remaining machines, his lips pressed tight, his eyes burning with fire. The blades came again, faster, sharper. Hunting him, the human slid, rolled, dodged, every movement costing him strength. Every second pushing his body to the edge. The crowd felt the tension. They leaned forward, breathless. This was no longer a game. This was survival, raw and true. One machine lunged, its saw slicing downward. The human grabbed a broken spear from the ground, a weapon left by some fallen fighter long ago. The wood cracked in his hands, the tip dull, but he held it firm. The machine swung, and with desperate force, he jammed the spear between the gears. Sparks exploded, the saw arm locked, screeched, twisted, the machine shuddered, its power straining. The human pulled with all his strength. The gears snapped, the arm broke. The machine stumbled, and the crowd screamed, half in rage, half in awe. The human staggered back, his chest on fire. every muscle screaming, but he smiled. Just a small, sharp smile. He had done what they thought impossible. He had taken their weapon and broken it from above. The eldest sister slammed her hand against the railing, her eyes sharp, her voice cold. "Enough! Bring the next stage," the crowd howled with excitement. They did not want this fight to end, but they also wanted more blood. The human stood in the center, breathing heavy, blood dripping down his arm, smoke and sparks filling the air. And yet his back was straight, his eyes were unbroken. He had survived the arena of blades. He had proved, at least for now, that humans were not as weak as they believed. But in the silence that followed, as the machines fell still, the sisters whispered among themselves, their voices low, almost uneasy. "If he survives the next trial," the youngest said, "then perhaps he is not here to die. Perhaps he is here to rise." And the gates began to open again. The real test was far from over. The fire from the broken machine still smoked in the arena. The human's chest rose and fell, each breath sharp, each muscle burning. He had survived blades and steel. But the sisters above were not satisfied. "Not yet." The eldest sister raised her hand, her voice cold and heavy. "Strength of body means nothing if the mind is fragile. Let us see if the human can endure the trial of mind." The crowd cheered wildly, eager for another show, their voices like a storm crashing against the metal walls. The ground beneath the human's feet began to shift. Stones sliding, walls rising, the arena twisted into something new. Not open and wide, but narrow and endless. A labyrinth of black glass and silver mirrors. The light from the dying star above bent strangely here, making shadows stretch too long, making reflections ripple as if alive. The human turned slowly, his hand brushing against the walls, cold, smooth, whispering with strange energy. His reflection stared back, not quite matching his movements. Its eyes too dark, its smile too sharp. The crowd had fallen quieter now, their roars replaced by murmurs. Even they could sense the danger of this trial. It was not blood and fire. It was something deeper, something that clawed at the soul. The youngest sister leaned forward, her voice soft. "If his spirit is weak, he will not last long," the second sister smirked. "And if his spirit is strong, this labyrinth will break it anyway." The eldest said nothing, her glowing eyes fixed on the human below. He walked forward slowly, his steps echoing, the mirrors shifting, showing not just his reflection, but scenes from his past, his village, his family, the faces of those he swore to protect, smiling, laughing, then burning, screaming, fading into ash. His breath caught in his throat, pain stabbed through his chest. The labyrinth was not just walls, it was alive. It was pulling his memories out and twisting them, turning love into loss, hope into despair. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms, whispering under his breath, "These are not real. These are not real." But the voices of his family echoed around him, calling his name, begging him to save them, accusing him for failing them. The crowd could not see what he saw. To them, the labyrinth looked empty, only walls and reflections. But they watched his shaking steps, his trembling hands, and they laughed, thinking fear had finally broken him. The human stopped, his body frozen. The reflection before him showed himself on his knees, broken, crying. The words whispered from the glass, "You are weak, you are nothing. You will die here." He shook his head, his voice low but firm. "No, I am more." His reflection laughed, the sound sharp, cutting. It became louder, multiplying. Every mirror around him filled with his own face, all mocking him, all laughing. He fell to one knee, his chest heavy, the weight crushing, but then from deep inside, he remembered the arena of blades, the machines, the fire, the crowd shouting for his death. And yet he had stood. He had fought. He had survived. He forced himself up, his legs trembling, his eyes sharp, his voice rising. "I am human. I am not weak. I will not break," his words echoed through the labyrinth. And for the first time the reflections faltered, their mocking smiles twitching, their laughter fading. The mirrors cracked. Lines spreading like spiderwebs, the ground shook. The labyrinth screamed with 1,000 voices, the illusions shattering one by one. The burning village faded, the accusing faces dissolved, until all that remained was silence. The human stood in the center, his chest heaving, his body broken but his spirit unbroken. He closed his eyes, steadying his breath. The whispers were gone, the illusions defeated above. The youngest sister whispered, almost with awe. He faced his fear, and he did not fall. The second sister growled, "Impossible. No human can endure the labyrinth." But the eldest raised her hand to silence them, her gaze sharper than ever. The crowd erupted once more, half screaming his name, half cursing his survival. They had come to see him broken. But instead they saw him stand taller than before, his weakness turning into strength before their very eyes. The human lifted his head, staring at the sisters above, his voice rough but strong. "Is this all you have?" Not a question, but a challenge. His words carried through the arena, silencing even the loudest shouts. The eldest sister narrowed her eyes, her lips curling into the smallest of smiles, not of kindness but of interest. "No, human. This is only the beginning," she said, and her voice shook the air like thunder. The walls of the labyrinth sank back into the ground, the arena shifting once more, the stone glowing with heat, the air thick with smoke, the scent of fire creeping in. The human braced himself, his body aching, his spirit steady. He had faced blades, he had faced fear, but now, something darker waited, something born of fire and shadow. The third trial was over, but the next would burn even brighter, and the crowd could not look away. The labyrinth sank into the ground, the arena shifting once more, the air heavy with smoke and silence. The human stood in the center, his chest rising and falling, his face pale but his eyes steady. He had endured not just blades, not just blood, but also the shadows of his own fear, and that alone had shaken the crowd. Above, the four sisters watched, their glowing eyes locked on the fragile figure below. The second sister crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "This should not be possible. No human has ever survived this far." Her words carried anger, but hidden beneath was unease. The youngest sister leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the human. "He is not like the others we have seen. There is something in him that refuses to die." Her voice was softer, almost thoughtful. But the third sister scoffed. "Nonsense. He is only delaying the inevitable. His body will break, his mind will crack. It is only a matter of time." The eldest sister remained silent for a long moment, her face unreadable, her armored fingers tapping against the railing, the sound echoing like a slow drumbeat. Finally she spoke, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. "Perhaps we were wrong to mock him so quickly." The words made the other sisters turn sharply, surprise flickering in their eyes. The eldest continued, "Look at the crowd. Their cheers are changing. They no longer laugh at him. They no longer see him as prey. They are beginning to wonder, to doubt." Her eyes narrowed. "And doubt is dangerous." Below, the human lifted his head. His eyes meeting theirs across the great distance, he could not hear their whispers, but he could feel the shift in the air, the tension, the weight of their attention pressing down on him. It was heavier than the blades, heavier than the illusions. Yet he did not look away for the first time. One of the sisters, the second, shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, as if the human's defiance had reached her. The youngest noticed and smiled faintly. "Do you feel it, sister, the way he stares? As if he is not the one in chains, but we are." The second sister's jaw tightened. "Do not be foolish. He is nothing. He is flesh. He bleeds. He will break." But her voice lacked the sharp certainty it had before, and the eldest caught it, filing the weakness away in silence. The crowd roared again, restless, hungry for more, their chants rising in waves, demanding the next trial, the next fight. They had tasted suspense and they craved more, like predators circling the scent of blood. But the sisters were no longer thinking only of the crowd. Memories stirred in their minds, old battles, old scars. Years ago, on a forgotten world, their army had faced human soldiers, weak, fragile, easy to crush. They had fallen by the hundreds, their weapons breaking, their bodies burning. The sisters had walked through them like fire through dry grass. To them, humans had been nothing but a lesson in weakness, and yet here stood one who did not fall, one who had faced machines, illusions, pain, and still stared back at them without fear. The eldest spoke again, her voice low, more to herself than to her sisters. "Perhaps strength is not only in flesh. Perhaps strength hides in the will to rise again." The second sister snapped. "You sound as if you admire him." But the eldest only smiled faintly. "Admiration is not weakness, it is recognition." The human below moved, slowly stretching his arms, wincing from wounds, his body marked with blood and burns, but every motion spoke of endurance. The crowd shouted his name now, a mix of mockery and praise, but still they shouted, his presence demanding their attention. The youngest sister whispered, "Do you not see? He is changing them, the crowd, us. Even this place feels different with him in it." The third laughed bitterly. Changing nothing, he will burn in the next trial, and they will forget him before the star dies. But the eldest remained quiet, her eyes locked on the human, her silence louder than all the words of her sisters. The human turned his head slightly, scanning the arena, waiting for what came next. He did not know their thoughts, but he could sense their hesitation. He could feel the cracks in their certainty. For the first time, the battle was no longer just survival. It was something larger. It was a question, unspoken but heavy in the air. What does it mean to be strong? What does it mean to be weak? The crowd chanted louder, their fists pounding against the walls, their voices merging into a storm. The human stood still in the eye of it, a single fragile body, yet somehow he seemed larger than the thousands around him. The eldest sister raised her hand, silencing the chants with one motion. The air grew heavy. Her voice rolled out, calm, steady, powerful. The trial of fire and shadow awaits. Her words carried both promise and threat. The youngest sister's gaze lingered on the human, her voice soft. If he survives this too, then perhaps he is not being tested for our amusement. Perhaps he is being tested for something else, the second sister scoffed, but her eyes betrayed unease. The third only shook her head, unwilling to believe, but the eldest did not scoff, did not deny. She simply watched, waiting, measuring the human with the eyes of a hunter who had finally found prey worth chasing. The arena floor began to crack, fire seeping through the stone, smoke curling upward, shadows moving within the flames like living creatures. The heat burned the air. The crowd screamed with joy. The human narrowed his eyes, sweat already forming on his brow, his hands trembling but steady. He whispered to himself, "I have come this far. I will not fall now." Above, the sisters leaned closer, their doubts unspoken, their curiosity sharp, their pride caught between fear and fascination. The trial of fire was about to begin, and in that moment, the sisters no longer asked if the human was too weak. They began to ask something else. What if he was strong enough? The stone floor cracked beneath his feet, fire spilling upward in thin streams, the heat spreading fast, the air heavy with smoke, the arena itself shifting into something more dangerous than any machine or illusion. It was alive with fire. It was alive with shadow. The crowd roared, their voices wild. They had seen blood, they had seen fear, but now they wanted destruction. They wanted to see the human consumed, turned into ash before their eyes. Above, the sisters leaned forward, their glowing eyes reflecting the flames below. The youngest whispered, "This is no ordinary trial. Even warriors of our kind struggle here." But the second sister smirked. "Then the human will not last a heartbeat." The eldest said nothing, her silence sharp, her gaze unblinking. The human stood still, the fire reflecting in his eyes, sweat sliding down his face, his chest heavy, his body already aching from the battles before. But his spirit steady, he whispered to himself, "I will endure. I will endure." His voice low but firm. The flames spread wider, the ground splitting into broken platforms of stone, rivers of fire flowing between them. The human jumped from one slab to another, the heat licking at his legs, the smoke clawing at his throat. From within the fire came the shadows, at first faint, then clearer, shapes that looked human but moved wrong, their bodies long and twisted, their eyes glowing red like molten rock. They crawled out of the fire with speed, their hands like claws, their voices a hiss. The crowd screamed with delight. The shadows were merciless, not machines, not illusions, but creatures of the flame itself. They had no weakness, no fear, no reason to stop, only hunger. The first shadow lunged, its claws slashing through the air. The human rolled aside, the heat of its body burning even without touch. He grabbed a broken shard of stone and swung it, striking the creature's chest. The blow passed through. The shadow rippled but did not fall. It turned its red eyes toward him and hissed. The human's heart pounded, his breath sharp. He realized this trial was not about strength or speed. It was about endurance, about surviving the storm of fire and shadow until something greater revealed itself. He leapt across another broken platform, the stone trembling beneath his feet. A shadow followed, its claws swiping, cutting across his arm. Blood spilled. The heat stung, but he clenched his jaw, refusing to cry out. The sisters above watched intently. The second smiled with cruel delight. "See, his blood spills, his strength fails. Soon it will end." But the youngest shook her head slowly. "No, he still rises, even when burned, even when cut. He still rises." Another shadow lunged. The human ducked low, grabbed a chain half buried in the stone, perhaps left from an old fight. He swung it hard, the chain glowing red from the heat. It struck the shadow's face, sparks burst, and the creature staggered, not destroyed but slowed. The human's eyes sharpened. He had learned something. The shadows were not invincible. They could be disrupted, their forms unstable under impact. They could not be killed like flesh, but they could be broken. The crowd gasped. Some jeered, some cheered. The arena shook with noise. The human swung the chain again, striking another shadow. Its body rippled and shattered into smoke, dissolving back into the fire. The human's chest heaved, his arms trembling, but his spirit burned hotter than the flames. The ground shook harder, more cracks opening, more shadows rising, 5 then 10, their hiss filling the air, their red eyes glowing through the smoke. The heat unbearable, the fire climbing higher. The human wiped the blood from his face, gripping the chain tight, his body shaking, his mind sharp. "One by one," he whispered. "I will break you one by one." He leapt forward, his chain spinning, striking, his body moving with desperation and defiance. The crowd stood on their feet now, screaming, the sister's eyes wide. The second furious, the youngest awed, the eldest silent but intent. The shadows swarmed him, their claws ripping across his skin. His body burned, his blood dripping onto the hot stone. But he did not stop. His chain struck again and again, each swing breaking one apart. The air filled with smoke and fire, his body breaking but his will unshaken. Finally, when the last shadow dissolved into smoke, the arena fell silent. Only the crackle of fire remained. The human dropped to one knee, his chest heaving, his skin blistered, his arms heavy but his eyes alive. Alive with the fire of someone who refused to die. The crowd roared louder than ever, not with mockery, not with hatred, but with something new. Respect. Above, the youngest whispered, her voice trembling. "He has done it. He has faced the fire and the shadow. And still he stands," the second spat. "No, he only delays the end. He cannot face what comes next." But her words rang hollow. Even she did not fully believe them. The eldest rose slowly, her voice carrying across the arena. "Enough trials if he is to prove himself. He must face me." Her words shook the air. The crowd erupted into madness. The sisters turned sharply, shocked, but the eldest's eyes burned with challenge. Below, the human lifted his head, his lips pressed tight, his body trembling but his spirit steady. He looked at her unafraid. The fire dimmed, the shadows faded. The arena stilled, all eyes fixed on one truth. The final trial was no longer machine or flame. It was the eldest sister herself, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the clash to come. The fire faded from the arena. The smoke cleared slowly. The broken stone cooled under the dying light of the star above. The crowd waited in silence, thousands of eyes fixed on the center, where the human knelt, blood dripping, skin burned, body trembling but spirit steady. Above, the eldest sister stood, taller than the others, her armor glowing faintly, her blade in her hand humming with power, its edge alive with blue light, the very air bent around it, the weapon of a champion, of a warlord, of a ruler. Her voice cut through the silence, cold and sharp. "Enough trials, enough shadows, enough machines. If you truly wish to prove your strength, then face me here and now." The crowd erupted, their roars shaking the walls. They had come for blood, but now they would see something greater. A duel of legend. The youngest sister's eyes widened, her voice soft but filled with warning. "Sister, do not underestimate him. He has survived what none before him have." But the second laughed. "It matters not. He may have survived trials, but he cannot stand against you. None can." The eldest gave no reply, her gaze fixed only on the human. The human pushed himself to his feet, his body screaming, every wound burning, but his eyes unbroken. He faced her, small in size, weak in flesh, yet larger than life in spirit. He whispered under his breath, "I will not kneel, not now, not ever." The eldest stepped forward, the ground shaking beneath her armor gleaming, her blade humming. She dropped from the high platform, landing in the arena with a thunderous impact, cracks spreading across the stone, dust rising into the air. The crowd fell silent, breathless, waiting for the first strike. The human raised his fists, no weapon in hand but his own will, his stance steady, though his legs trembled, his eyes locked on hers. The eldest smiled faintly, a smile not of cruelty but of challenge. "Show me, human. Show me why you endure." She lunged faster than his eyes could follow, her blade slashing through the air with the sound of lightning. He rolled aside, the strike splitting stone, sparks flying, the ground shattered where he had stood. The crowd gasped, the human's breath sharp, his heart pounding. She was faster, stronger, beyond anything he had faced, but he did not freeze. He moved again, dodging, weaving, forcing his body to obey even as it begged to stop. She struck again, and again, each blow like thunder, each swing a storm. He ducked under one strike, slid back from another, sparks burning across his skin, pain tearing into him. But still he moved. Above, the sisters watched. The youngest whispered, "Look, he does not try to match her strength. He uses her power against her," the second hissed. "He runs, he flees, he delays his death." But her voice was not steady. It trembled with unease. The eldest pressed harder. Her strikes faster, sharper, her blade cutting through air and stone. The human stumbled, nearly falling, but then something changed. He began to see the rhythm, the flow of her attacks, the slight pause between each swing. The moment her weight shifted, he ducked under a slash, grabbed a broken chain from the ground, wrapped it around his arm. The next strike came, and with desperate strength he caught the blade with the chain. Sparks exploded, the force threw him back, his arm nearly breaking, but the blade was stopped. For a single heartbeat, the crowd roared. The sisters leaned forward. The eldest narrowed her eyes, her voice low. "Clever!" The human staggered up, blood dripping, chain broken, but his eyes alive. He had not won. Not even close, but he had shown her that he was not helpless prey. She came again, her strikes brutal, each one meant to end him. His body grew slower, his breath weaker, but his eyes sharper. He was not fighting to overpower her. He was fighting to endure, to survive, to make her see. The youngest sister whispered, "He is not only fighting her, he is fighting us, our belief." "Our pride," the second growled, but did not answer. Her eyes locked on the human with something dangerously close to respect. The duel raged on, stone breaking, sparks flying, the arena filled with thunder. The human fell once, twice, but each time he rose again, slower, weaker, but unbroken. Finally, the eldest stopped, her blade humming at her side, her chest steady, her eyes locked on him. She raised her voice. "Why do you rise, human? Your body is broken. Your strength spent, why not kneel? Why not die?" The human's breath shook, his blood dripping onto the stone, but he raised his head, his voice rough but steady. "Because I am not weak, because every time I rise, I prove you wrong." The crowd fell silent. The sister silent too, the words echoing in the fire-lit air. The eldest smiled, faint but real. She raised her blade once more, her voice low but powerful. "Then rise once more." For the final strike, the human steadied his stance, his body broken, his spirit burning. The arena shook with silence. The final clash about to begin, and for the first time, the sisters, the crowd, even the arena itself, no longer saw a fragile human. They saw a warrior. The arena held its breath. The fire burned low. The smoke curled into the starless sky. The human stood broken, his body trembling, his blood dripping onto the cracked stone. Across from him, the eldest sister stood tall, her armor gleaming, her blade glowing. The final clash was moments away. The crowd was silent. No jeers, no laughter, only silence, their eyes locked on the two figures, prey and predator, or perhaps something more. The eldest lifted her blade, its edge humming like thunder trapped in steel. Her voice steady. "One final strike, human, rise, and face me," her words echoed. Heavy, unshakable, the human steadied his breath, his body screaming with pain, his arms shaking, but his spirit still burning. He whispered, low but clear, "I will not kneel. I will not break," and he raised his fists, small compared to her weapon, but strong in meaning. The eldest lunged, her blade a streak of light, faster than lightning, stronger than stone. The ground shook with her step, the air cracked with her strike. But the human moved, slow in body, sharp in mind. He shifted aside at the last breath, his hand grabbing the chain at his feet, his arm twisting, the blade struck, sparks exploding. The chain wrapped around the hilt for a single heartbeat. The eldest pulled back. But in that heartbeat, the human stepped in, closer than she expected, his elbow slamming into the joint of her armor. His body breaking, but his will unyielding. The eldest staggered, her eyes wide, not from pain but from shock. No one had ever come so close. No one had ever dared. The crowd erupted, half screaming in awe, half in rage. The walls shook with their voices. The human fell to one knee, his chest heaving, his strength nearly gone, but his eyes still locked on hers, burning, unbroken. He whispered, "Yield or strike again, but I will rise no matter how many times you cut me." The eldest lowered her blade slowly, the hum fading, silence filling the arena again. She looked at him long, her eyes glowing, her voice low. "You are not strong because you fight. You are strong because you refuse to stop." The sisters above leaned forward, The second's eyes wide with disbelief. No, this cannot be. He cannot make you yield. The youngest's voice soft but sure. He has already won, not by blade, not by force, but by will. The eldest raised her voice, her words rolling like thunder across the arena. Enough, this trial is over, the crowd gasped. Some roared in protest, others cheered wildly, the sound shaking the heavens. The human collapsed to both knees, his body giving in at last, but his head still high, his eyes still burning. He had not fallen in defeat. He had fallen in victory. The eldest looked at him, then turned to the crowd, her voice sharp. You came to see a weak human die. Instead, you have seen a warrior rise. Remember this day, for it will echo in your blood. The youngest stepped forward beside her, her eyes locked on the human, her voice softer, almost respectful. This was never about sport, never about humiliation. It was a test, to see if a human could endure what even our kind fear. The second sister hissed, but her voice shook. And he passed, he faced what none could, and he stands still. The truth spread through the crowd like fire. This was not a simple trial, not entertainment, but something greater. A search, a measure, a question of strength that went beyond flesh and blade. The eldest leaned down, her voice low, only for the human to hear. You have proven us wrong. You are not weak. You are not prey. You are worthy. Her words carried weight heavier than steel. The human's lips pressed tight, his body broken, but his heart steady. He whispered, Then I have done what I came for, not for me, but for all my kind. The crowd roared again, but this time it was not laughter, not mockery, it was respect. Their voices rising into the starless sky, the name of the human echoing through the arena. The sisters stepped back, their eyes no longer filled with scorn, but with recognition. The eldest raised her blade, not in threat but in salute. The youngest bowed her head slightly. The second turned away, unable to speak. The human tried to stand, his legs trembling, but he forced himself up, slow, painful but steady. He faced the crowd, his chest heaving, his voice rough but strong. Remember this night. Remember what you called weak. Remember what you saw rise. The arena shook with their answer, their voices a storm. The eldest whispered almost to herself. Perhaps strength was never ours alone. Perhaps strength was always waiting in the places we did not look. Her eyes locked on the human, her lips curling into the faintest smile, not of mockery but of respect. The star above burned low, the shadows fading, the fire dying, the trial complete, the truth revealed. The human had not only survived, he had changed them. And somewhere deep inside, the sisters knew. The galaxy itself would never be the same.